In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
And that's why it's interesting that tonight's episode just happens to be episode 13. I call it Lucky 13. Yesterday, yes, it scared us all. It gave us all a moment of, but it ended well. And as you saw, that speech went beautifully and the crowd loved him. And the evening could not have ended on a better note than that. And I feel it was a very lucky day. The luck of the Irish was with him. His guardian angels were with him, and his security team did a bang-up, crack job. They did a fantastic job, better than the Secret Service, which brings me to the question of
careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah, I mean, Bobby is once again asking, renewing his plea to this administration to provide him Secret Service protection. The Secret Service and the Biden White House are dragging their feet for reasons that baffle me. Secretary Mayorkas and the Department of Homeland Security denied Kennedy's request a couple of months ago, even though he submitted and his security team gave them a 67-page document of threats that he's received against his life that they take seriously. They don't think these are just random trolls. They think they're quite serious.
Well, there was that guy who got like within steps of his bedroom the other day, and
got to the top floor of his house. Yeah.
If anybody ever deserved protection, it's this guy. And I saw it online today, right before your show. People are like, "No one ever gets protection this early." That's not true. Obama had protection this early. Yeah,
Ted
Obama
Kennedy had
death threats. Yep.
Ted Kennedy, when he challenged Jimmy Carter, and those two hated each other, right? They hated each other, and yet Carter granted him Secret Service protection a year before the election. And so, Jim, you had a story about President Carter that you were going to share with us. Would you tell me that story?
Well,
tell everybody.
Lisa's familiar with this story. It's one of the most bizarre stories you're ever going to hear about presidential, perhaps, assassinations. I think it was in 78 or 79 that Carter came out to Los Angeles, okay, and he was speaking at some big convention center. And the police picked up a guy who was acting suspicious at a hotel across the street. And then they picked up a guy that he said he knew, okay, that was part of this, okay, and the guy had a revolver. The guy up in the hotel had a revolver, and he had apparently practiced shooting. He delivered about 8 rounds, okay, and he said this other guy that he named was a guy who told him to do this. The bizarre thing about this is that the guy up in the hotel room was named Osvaldo, and the guy down on the street was named Harvey. Okay.
Raymond Lee Harvey.
No way.
Raymond Lee Harvey Osvaldo.
Yes. And if you put the two names together.
What are the odds?
And Raymond was the character from the Manchurian Candidate, you know, who fired at a president, you know, so it's like, and this is the story where Raymond Lee Harvey was firing blanks as a way to distract so that the actual shooters would get their shots off. Just like what I argue happened in the pantry. And I didn't know that when I wrote
to his father, to Robert F. Kennedy Sr.
Yes.
That's your theory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And if I had read that before, it would have been in my book. Yeah. It's like this again. These are templates. These are practice plots that work. Except this time they had a guy who decided he wanted to do a little. He wanted to see how loud the gun was going to be, and you know the blanks went off and people looked because he was in the crowd, and they got him. Yeah. So.
And by the way, again, that might sound too wild, but you can look it up. It's even on Wikipedia.
The New York Times.
Okay.
Yeah. well, Wikipedia, I don't use as a source for anything, but the New York Times did do a pretty decent story on that at one point, because they tried to make that story go away immediately. And so
Right, they
like
did. They tried to make it disappear, you know,
and then,
but it's still around.
When it went to trial, they're like, you know, there's more to this story. And then it disappeared forever. But well, the New York Times did a really in-depth article about it first.
I know that we did an interview with you, Lisa, a couple months back on the 55th anniversary back in June. And, you know, I always thought, and Bobby agrees, it's his theory as well, that the man who really shot and killed his father was not Sirhan Sirhan, who he believes to be innocent, who was a mind-controlled patsy, a distractionary shooter, if you will, shooting up the pantry and acting crazy so everyone paid attention to him, while the real shooter delivered the shot that hit Senator Kennedy 1 inch, less than 1 inch from his ear. And he believes that it was the security guard, that Thane Eugene Caesar, who died a couple of years ago. And you have a different theory, which we'll get to in a moment. But the first thing I thought of, Lisa, when I heard this news,
security guard.
I thought, okay, it's a security, or it's a rent-a-cop guy who just got the job, and all I could think of was Thane Eugene Caesar. So, anyway, I know that you
the
don't.
Parallels are amazing.
Thane did it. You have a different theory. Can you explain it kind of briefly? What you think happened?
Sure, very briefly. Thane was literally at Kennedy's right elbow. He was pulling him through the pantry until he got about halfway, and then he stood there. Now, according to one witness, it looked like Thane was holding him in place there at that point when the shooting started. But there are three, if Thane's on this side, there are 3 shots under the back of Kennedy's like armpit area, each at a steep upward angle and going across like from back to front and from right to left. And the shot behind the ear, his arm would have been very exposed for that shot. But the shots under the arm, he could hide with his own body. It would have been super easy for Thane to have shot him. But he was a fairly big, tall guy. If he had pulled out his hand and shot Kennedy, a lot of people were already looking at both of them, and he would have been very exposed. There are 2 witnesses, one of whom was George Plimpton's wife, Freddie Plimpton, and the other guy, his name is Ray. I forget his last name. I met him on the set of Bobby. I was an extra in the film Bobby because I had done a little consulting with them about the ambassador and shared some maps and some stories with them. And they put me in the film. And this guy and the woman both saw a guy in a white busboy jacket go right up to Kennedy's head. And they both swore, well, Ray was certain it was Sirhan. I know for a fact it wasn't, because Sirhan was wearing blue all night and had a blue velour pullover that did not look in any way like a white busboy jacket. But there were lookalikes there. And so it's very possible that he saw the actual assassin who made the headshot. And Freddie said, I saw his hand right up. I was certain he had killed Kennedy, but I didn't see a gun. I don't know why I didn't see a gun. And of course, CIA and presumably other agencies, they have a gun, a .22, that'll fit in the palm of your hand that you control with a ring on your finger. You can literally shoot somebody and no one will see a gun. The Navy had a weapon that went in a white glove. So if you're in a white busboy outfit, if you have gloves on or something, it was like a piston action. If you put your hand up, you could trigger it just by pressing against somebody's head. And then the CIA had like a cigarette pack that was a gun. And it looks exactly, it's in the museum. You can go see it if you ever go to D.C.
In the International Spy Museum?
You hit a little secret button and boom, it fires. They also had camera guns. And I have personal experience with this. I didn't know at the time what the big deal was, but Gerald Ford drove right by my house. I used to live in Palo Alto, and Gerald Ford came to Palo Alto, went to Stanford that day. And I was all excited. Wow, president's driving by my house. I was 13. I had a little Kodak camera, and I put it up to my eye to take a picture. And suddenly a guy on a megaphone is like, put the camera down.
Put the camera down.
A SWAT guy
Drop the camera, little girl.
The truck, it starts running at me, and I'm like terrified. And so, of course, they put the camera down. Well, it turned out that was the day before Sarah Jane Moore had shot him. And they had already had threats that he might be shot at Stanford. And the CIA has camera guns. They can hide a gun in a camera. So imagine somebody pulling up a camera right next to Kennedy's head. You know, no one would even know. You know, it just looks like a camera. Gordon
and when I hear stuff like that, I think, okay, you know, Secret Service 99% of the time does a great job. But then there's that 1% of the time in Dallas where everything went wrong. Everything that could go wrong in Dallas did go wrong. But I have a question, and I want to see what both you guys think. Do you think here in a week or two, they're going to go through this Adrian guy's house and going to find some diaries that say RFK must die, RFK must die?
Well, since he did
Sorry to joke about that.
I'm pretty sure they won't. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a very serious investigation. Sadly, and I'm not sad that he didn't die, but because he didn't die, sadly, there won't be a very serious investigation, I fear. Go ahead, Jim. Yeah, sorry.
You can't go to the well too often. Okay. You know, all these guys, like, I'll never forget one night Truman Capote was on the Tonight Show. And he says, Johnny, you know, I'm a literary guy. I write books. Okay, I've written several books. I've written a couple of bestsellers. Guess what? I don't keep a diary. But all these guys, this James Earl Ray guy, they all keep diaries. You know?
Funny thing, that.
Yep.
That's funny. They wrote down all their intentions in their little diaries, like Oswald and like Sirhan, supposedly.
You know? Well, I think the equivalent of a diary is that little YouTube video. And again, if you've ever been on not YouTube, TikTok. I've been on TikTok, you know, many times, and most people have literally hundreds of videos on their page. You know, to have only one video in all that time feels like a plan, a setup for something that was going to happen later.
It sure does.
And this might have been it. Because, like I said, maybe this is
Lisa, let's give this guy the benefit of the doubt. Okay, at least for right now. All right.
We won't convict him yet. He hasn't even seen a judge for his arraignment.
Well, like I said, even if he,
but I have the same feeling you do.
To kill, he might have been a victim himself, like Sirhan was.
That's right.
A victim of mind control. You know, so I don't know what happened. You know, he apparently lied to his brother. That's a huge red flag. Beyond that, we have to wait and see the rest of the evidence. So, which I know you and I are going to be looking for very carefully.
With a fine-tooth comb, because that's what we do. We assassination researchers. We've been obsessed with this stuff all of our lives, and we go to primary sources. We don't just read stuff on the internet and think it's true. We're old school, you know. We're so old. We remember the old, you know, card files and the Dewey Decimal System, having to go find actual books and papers and microfilm and microfiche at the library before the internet, and we had to write a letter to the National Archives and request specific documents under a FOIA request, and then wait 6 months to a year to even get a letter back. And then you'd have to get you'd have to pay for photocopying to get big stacks of documents made for you, and then they would ship them to you snail mail. And I mean, we're old people. That's how we used to do it before everything was digitized and available online with the click.
Well, and not everything has been digitized, right?
Well, you can say that again.
Files that even
thank God for the JFK Act. Okay, because that made a lot of documents appear out of nowhere. But the thing is, there's never been one for the RFK case, and there's never been one for the MLK case. So does Oliver Stone have to make a movie about the King case, and then, you know, for there to be?
I was hoping he would. I've wanted him to make a real movie about the RFK assassination, because the movie Bobby, you know, it didn't even get into that.
I don't even want to talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a serious picture.
And by the way, he said, Lisa, I'm sure you're aware of this. You know, he said that, yes, I'm aware of Lisa Peace's research on the Bobby Kennedy case, but I didn't want to get Oliver stoned, okay, by going down that path, okay? So,
said that. But he did thank me. I went to a school.
Yeah, he did. He did,
Yeah, made me stand up and introduced me to the audience. And this woman knows the real story, and you should get her book, because I gave him a copy of it and he brought it, and I thought that was really cool. I have great love for Emilio because he's a good guy. Yeah.
And you know, these days I don't think Hollywood would allow such a movie to be made. And even when they made Bobby, what was that, like 2006, 2007, when that movie came out? Even then, Hollywood was so tightly controlled that they weren't going to really.
Oh yeah, well, CI doesn't ever want
topic,
that to happen again. Yeah. After Oliver Stone's film came out, the CI literally opened an office in Hollywood and staffed it, and all film requests now go through that office. And I took a film class at UCLA, and my instructor, when he found out I was into the Kennedy assassination, he goes, "Oh, remind me at lunch, I have a funny story." And I'm like, okay. So lunch came, we were in the elevator together. I'm like, "So what was that story?" He's like, "Oh, I gotta tell you." He said, "So I knew Oliver Stone, and Oliver Stone gave me that famous memo, Jim, that's the media memo, you know, the instructions to media assets."
Yes. Right.
Oliver had given this guy that, and he said, "Show that to them before your meeting and it'll probably go better." Meaning they'll say, "But what about the media?" And it's his way of saying, "Well, look, they're all controlled by the CIA." What the guy didn't know, as he passed out the memo, ran to the bathroom and came back, and the room was stone cold silent, because the CIA author of that memo was at the vetting table to decide whether to document.
Hey, I wrote this thing.
This is a true story. Now, the funny thing was, it was a low-budget documentary, and he and his wife had done it, and they were blaming the FBI, and of course it got approved because they weren't blaming the CIA. And he said, "So when they approved it, I thought maybe we got it wrong."
You know, I was speaking of the FBI. I was, you know, how we assassination researchers kind of argue amongst ourselves. We do that a lot. I was arguing with someone the other night about J. Edgar Hoover, because, you know, so many people want to lump Hoover in with the CIA and say, you know, he was in on it. I don't think Hoover was in on the planning of the assassination. I don't believe that. I mean, I'm no fan of J.
He wrote in the margins, "Those double-dealing CIA people lied to me about the Mexico
That's right. That's right.
I mean,
and I want people to understand that Hoover, despite his many failings, was an excellent cop. He'd been doing police work since the 1910s. He founded the FBI. He was the FBI. And the reason that we had such excellent forensics, and the reason that the FBI was so good at solving crimes, was J. Edgar Hoover and how he trained his men. And so Hoover, had the CIA not existed, had they not been there to hide things from the Warren Commission,
tried to keep them from existing.
The FBI would have and could have, I believe, solved this case. I think Hoover had the gist of it within the first 24 hours. And, you know, that the CIA had tons of blackmail on J. Edgar Hoover because of his own sexual life.
If you read the transcripts with Johnson, it's pretty clear that Hoover doesn't know what the heck is going on in Mexico City. All right? He doesn't have no idea. He goes, "Well, now we have these pictures of this guy who the CIA says is Oswald, but he's not Oswald. Then we've got these tapes that the CIA sent up, and they say this is Oswald, but my agents say, no, this is not Oswald. We're talking to him right now." Okay?
Right, right. That's not his voice.
Later on, there was a guy who was stationed in Atlanta who was transferred to Dallas in the summer, I think, June of 1964, to work on the JFK case. And so the agents there took him down to this auditorium, and they watched his Zapruder film. Okay? So they're walking out, and the guy from Atlanta, who obviously doesn't know what the heck's going on, he says, "Well, apparently he was hit from two different directions." And the guys say to him, "Do you think we don't know that? That's not what Hoover and Colson want to hear. Okay? So we can't say it." Okay?
That's a great point, man. And you know, most people would not go through the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission report, but if they did, I mean, we all know that some of the best research, some of the truth is buried in those 26 volumes. And most of those
Volume
are
26 to be exact.
Yeah.
By the way, Lisa actually had a set.
I literally, that's why I turned around.
An original?
I used to have a shelf of books behind me with my Warren Commission volumes on it. And I thought, because when I first started getting to it, I thought, if I were Alan Dulles, where would I hide the best information? I'm like, I'm going to start at the end and read backwards.
Plain sight.
Sure enough, that's where all the good stuff is. David,
by the way, that's what she told me. She goes, Jim, they buried everything in 25 and 26.
That's
all
right.
this interesting stuff because they didn't think anybody would read that.
All the best stuff is at the end in the last 2 volumes. True. And there's so much truth in there. And of course, it completely contradicts the summary, the Warren report. That's what Alan Dulles wanted you to believe, because he knew most people would never get past the first book. And so all the good stuff is down there in 25 and 26. Exactly.
Well, that's exactly what Dulles said. Okay. Yeah. He said, let's publish it all. Nobody reads anymore. Like a few university professors will read it, maybe a couple lawyers, but that's all.
Guys like you. Girls like you.
Yeah.
Girls like me. Yeah. Only a few nerds will actually bother to read it all. And they won't figure it out for another 50 years or 60 years. I mean, we're still figuring things out. We're still trying to pry documents out of the government. But, you know, most of the documents that are left that we're still trying to get are mostly CIA documents at this point. Isn't that right? I think most of the FBI documents are out there.
And some
military.
Yeah.
Right.
Jeff Morley says that one of the documents they won't give up is this. Joanides was cleared for what the CIA calls SI, which is Special Intelligence, in the summer of 1963. They will not give up what that Special Intelligence was, you know. And I go, well, Jeff, do you think it's about Mexico City? And Jeff said, Jim, if that's it, the game's over. Okay? If this is about Mexico City, game, set, match. All right? You know, he says it might just be about the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
I was thinking New Orleans.
Right. Yeah. Okay. You know.
But my thought, just for what it's worth, I was thinking more New Orleans than Mexico City.
Now with what Biden has done to the JFK Act, I don't think we're ever going to know. But if you read Andrew Eiler's article at Kennedy's and King, Biden just took a flamethrower to the JFK Act. Okay. And
he says it's no longer in effect and doesn't apply.
You're exactly right. You're exactly
just like that. It doesn't matter anymore.
He completely
disturbing.
Unilaterally, he changed the strictures in the JFK Act. It's not going to be released. It's only going to be released through a special channel at the National Archives, and the CIA and the FBI and the State Department are all going to be allowed to argue that no, you shouldn't release this. And that panel does not have the power to unlike the ARB, which did have the power to overrule the CIA. This does not have the power to overrule the CIA. You know, very, very interesting story.
The CIA runs this darn government.
We're getting a little
and isn't it sinister, guys, that we're right back where we started before the JFK Records Act? If that's going to be the case, if the CIA gets to decide which
they get final say, we don't run.
And we're right. It's almost like the JFK Records Act never happened. It's like we're right back to the Warren Commission, where the CIA is literally, you know, gatekeeping which documents we can see, but all that will change on day one, on January 20th, 2025, if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. becomes our next president. So I know we're just about out of town. When? I know we're just about out of time. And there was one last tidbit that I wanted to.
I'm going to interrupt just 1 second. And that's
go ahead.
Robert Kennedy himself, the father, had said the last day of his life, they asked him, like, why do you always say, like, when I'm president? You know, why don't you say if I'm president? He's like, you can't think like that. You just can't. You have to assume the positive, basically. So that's why I said the when. It was a tribute to RFK. So
I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
Okay.
Well, you know, we were talking about the theater where all this happened last night, just down the road from the former site of the Ambassador, of course, that was demolished gosh, almost 2 decades ago, I guess. But the Wilshire has been there since 1927. And, it's a really interesting place. I know you've been there. I've been there. And
I live a
part
couple
of its
blocks from
illustrious
Wilshire.
history. There are a couple of interesting things about the building's history. It's the last place that the public ever saw Amelia Earhart before she took her ill-fated flight in 1937. She made her last public appearance at the Wilshire Able Theater. And also, and I found this a really kind of spooky coincidence, Judy Garland was discovered by an MGM talent scout by the name of Joseph Mankiewicz in the early 30s, back when she was still known as Frances Gum of the Gum Sisters. They performed vaudeville there at that theater, and that's where she was actually discovered and brought to MGM and made a big star. But Joseph Mankiewicz was the uncle of Robert Kennedy's press secretary,
Frank Mankiewicz.
Right. That's right. He was the great Joseph Mankiewicz, of course, Hollywood legend. Frank was his nephew. And for those of you who might not know who I'm talking about and why Frank Mankiewicz is important, most of you, I'm sure, will remember Frank Mankiewicz from this moment.
Senator Robert Francis Kennedy
1968.
Died at 1:44 a.m. today, June 6, 1968. With Senator Kennedy, at the time of his death, were his wife Ethel, his sisters Mrs. Stephen Smith, Mrs. Patricia Lawford, brother-in-law Mr. Stephen Smith, his sister-in-law Mrs. John F. Kennedy. He was 42 years old.
June 6th, 1968. Words that I hope we will never, ever hear again, and certainly not from any Kennedy press secretaries. I'm very relieved, as I'm sure you all are, that we didn't hear anything like that last night, and that it's all good news in the end. The man is captured. He is in custody. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, and is probably going to be looking at a long time behind bars, especially if they charge him federally with impersonating a U.S. Marshal. That ought to put him away for a good long time. Question is, does he have conspirators out there who, might be coming back for more? I don't think he will, but this may be, is he a pro? Certainly one thing that we can think of. Oh, a probe.
Yeah,
I thought you said a probe.
Test of Kennedy's security to see.
Right.
I'm sure there's going to be different attacks to see where the weak spot is. And clearly getting on his team by volunteering and showing up isn't going to work. So that's good.
That's right.
But,
Gavin DeBecker, he doesn't, he's got a sharp eye. He knows everybody on his team. And this guy probably stood out like a sore thumb. He didn't have the right credentials on him. Those tattoos, I don't think Gavin's going to hire guys with tattoos like that. Just saying. So, there's so many questions that are yet to be answered. There's so much information. This is all preliminary. It was less than 24 hours ago. And of course, LAPD is still investigating. It's an ongoing investigation. This suspect was very quiet when he was being taken into custody yesterday. He wasn't like Oswald screaming, "I'm a patsy." He had absolutely nothing to say while he was being cuffed and taken away. Like Sirhan. And he had kind of we couldn't see his eyes because he had shades on, but I wish we could have seen his eyes because, Lisa, I wanted to see if he had a vacant
I had
stare,
the same thought.
if he was not quite there in the moment.
Dilated. Yep.
That's
I almost
so.
wanted
It's
to
interesting
find out
that he
who
had
the
shades
arresting
on.
Officers were. Yeah. When you called, if you're able to find out who the arresting officer is, you should try and talk to that person and ask what his impression of him was, especially before this is a big story. So
I would love to talk to
might
the
tell the
arresting
truth.
officer. So far, they're just keeping me stuck with the PIO, the public information officer. But boy, if I could track down one or more of the arresting officers, I couldn't read their names on their badges in the arresting video.
Yeah.
I was trying really hard to blow up the video so I could get the officers' names and try to find them. But if you find out, I hope you'll let me know, or maybe you can talk to them since you live there.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe you can look them up. So, Lisa, where can people look you up? Where can people find you and follow you and support you and buy your book?
I hang out on Twitter. That's usually the best place to find me, at Lisa Pease.
At Lisa
My
Pease.
book is everywhere. Any bookstore can get it for you. Please support your independent bookstores. But if you can't or don't have one near you, Amazon works. If you search my name, you will find my book. And you will find that Jim is listed as a co-author of my book. Even though
I'm listed as a co-author?
Yeah,
all I did was write the introduction. So it's 7 pages long. Okay.
Yeah.
You wrote the foreword, but now you've been graduated, promoted to co-author,
But,
man.
congrats on your great book, Jim.
You going to send him 50% of the money?
No.
No. That's an easy one. No. And the book is
Not
called...
after all those years.
The title
The
of the
book is
book?
called A Lie Too Big to Fail, The Real History of the Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy.
Love that title. It's a great title and so very true. And Jim, tell
Yes.
people where people can find you and follow
Well,
you.
it's right there. It's kennedysandking.com.
Ta-da.
Okay, it's right below my name there. Okay, that's the website that I edit and publish. And my latest book is the accompanying volume to JFK Revisited, which has both screenplays, the long version and the short version, but it also has the excerpts from the interviews that didn't get into the movie.
That's the
And
best
we
part.
had a literal all-star cast, okay, including Lisa, okay, including Judge John Thunheim, Cyril
And Robert
Weck,
Kennedy Jr. himself.
Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jim called me the day after Robert Kennedy Jr. He was like, Lisa, the whole movie, we were all doing, we were like all in tears and stuff. Yeah. He got a little emotional.
Jim, I don't know if you can still hear me, but I wanted to
I
ask
can
you
hear
before we close, could you tell me, of course, we are coming up in less than 2 months on the 60th anniversary of the JFK assassination, and there's going to be a lot of big events this year. What are you going to be up to this November? Can you tell me what you have going on?
I'll be speaking at the Cincinnati Mercantile Library. I believe that's on November the 14th. And then I'll be going to Pittsburgh
Great.
on the 15th, 16th. That's going to be the big event.
That's going
to be, and
yeah.
Mr. Landis is actually going to be there.
Oh,
Okay.
Really? And that's
Among
at the
the
Cyril
whole
Wecht
gallery.
conference, right?
Right. That's Cyril Wecht Conference at Duquesne. And you can go ahead and reserve your seat, okay, online for CAPA, C-A-P-A. But that's where I'll be speaking on the anniversary.
So you're not going to Dallas this time?
No,
At all?
Take a look at the gallery of stars that they have at the CAPA conference this year. Okay, yeah, that's where I'll be.
Well, and if you go to Dallas, it seems like only the cute people are in Dallas these days. So you'll get accosted by
all the more
cute
reason
people.
to avoid it.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's why I don't go to Dallas conference anymore. I'm very sorry to say. It's turned into a pretty unserious conference. So the real conference this year, yes, is the Duquesne one with the great Dr. Cyril Wecht and the great Jim D'Eugenio, and so many eminent speakers will be there. So I will definitely be trying to watch that online.
I actually think you can. I actually think you can. Okay.
Good. So they will be live streaming it.
I think there'll be a Zoom, yeah.
Is that Lancer? Is Lancer involved in that? JFK Lancer?
No.
This is separate from that.
This is CAPA.
Yeah, this is CAPA.
Coalition Wecht's organization.
Yeah.
And by the way, just to give you a teaser, my subject is going to be the death of JFK and the rise of the neocons.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jim, I hope if you can find time for us, I know this is the busy season of every year for you, but we would love to have you back on Maverick News around the anniversary this year and have another great long talk with you just about JFK. And this big 60th anniversary is so important.
Wait a minute. Fred Astaire without Ginger Rogers?
Okay. You're welcome to come too. You can join us.
And Lisa, I would like to have you back still to do that show about Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got to do that Howard Hughes episode. So we will do that. We will have you both back together separately or together.
Together
anytime.
is fine.
We love you guys. And thank you so much for, on short notice, joining us for this panel discussion tonight. Your insights, your wisdom, your knowledge is just invaluable, and our audience appreciates it, and so do we. So
thank you too so much, Lori and Rick. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks
to you
you
too. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this week for Strange Bedfellows, this special report, episode 13. I hope you will like and share this video. Please get it out because you can't get two better experts than the ones that you saw here on this program tonight. And we will see you back here next Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for Strange Bedfellows. Good night, everybody.
In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.